Welcome back to What's on My Needles, and this is the second installment where instead of showing you a project, I'm just going to talk through some topics that come up within fiber arts, within knitting, and so on. And this time I'm going to talk about knitting in public. So most of the time when we think of knitting, crocheting, we think of doing it at home. That's the image that we have from our grandparents. That's the image we have from media. We are sitting at home working on it. Most of the time in front of the TV, frankly. I, like many others, take my craft out into the world. I learned how to knit and walk quite a while ago. I learned how to knit in the dark quite a while ago. One was because of necessity, and one was because I figured out I could. So I learned to knit in the dark because I work in theater. The downside about being in theater is that it is extremely dark backstage, and backstage is where I was, and I couldn't turn on more lights. It would be seen on stage, be distracting for the audience and the performers. Therefore, I could not turn on the lights. So I figured out how to choose my patterns in such a way that I could knit without looking at it effectively. This has also meant that I can knit at doctor's and dentist's office. I can knit while I'm walking. That one, again, I have to be careful of which pattern I pick, but it is down to picking pattern, not down to I can't. And being willing to and expecting to make flubs and therefore have to backtrack and fix it. So that's the other part of this, is I've gotten very good at, when I have the chance to sit down at home, to fix those mistakes. I also knit in class. While I was going to in-person college, and actually this started in high school, I would knit during lectures. And some teachers didn't care. This was mostly the college professors. And some teachers cared a lot and sent me to the principal's office. Yeah, that didn't stop the behavior. It just made it a lot more fun for me to cover for it. So, yeah. I also, pre-COVID, was doing 5K, 10K, and half marathons. I have not gone back yet. Right now it's still too people-y for me. So I would actually have a bag I would clip to the waistband of my pants, and I would just work on a project while I was walking. On more than one occasion, I actually designed projects while I was walking, and we'll say that's not the smartest idea in the world, but it did work. So that being said, knitting in public brings up some interesting issues. So the first issue is, how do you move the yarn around? Well, one option is to have project bags. This is about as large as I'm willing to go and not have it be a backpack. I've made project bags on this channel, but when they're independent from my purse, again, this is about as large as I'm willing to go. I do normally stash my project in my purse or in my backpack, again, depending on where I am. And I have gotten in the habit, thanks to too many places with metal detectors, thanks to too many people asking questions, I'm really good at taking needles that have no metal on them. So you have probably noticed over the course of my videos, I knit with bamboo. That's partially because it is grippy and I use acrylic yarn, which is not. Therefore, having grippy needles is useful. There are other fibers where that's also true. Again, that's just the fiber I work with. But in addition to that, you can get bamboo needles that are completely metal free. Meaning, if I'm wearing jeans or shorts with pockets, I can throw my project, or I can throw my needles coiled up in the back pocket of my pants. And no one knows they're there. The metal detectors don't see them, and it's fine. I also have 2 different versions of cutters that make it so they're both obviously metal, but I have yet to come across a security person who knows what they are. So they get through security real easy because they look like keychains. So yeah. Now for the other aspect of this, and that's the social aspect. Knitting in public leads to a lot of questions. And those questions range from curiosity to rude. I'm going to try to focus more on the curiosity aspect than the rude aspect. And I'm going to kind of go into this using an example that's not me. That example is, for a couple Olympics now, we have had athletes during the Olympics, during competition, often not their own, though there was at least one round where it was their own competition, knitting or crocheting. Either in the stands, waiting for their turn, somewhere where cameras could see them. And it makes news every time it happens, which is why we know it happens. One of the divers for this previous Olympics, this is being filmed in 22. So for the 2020 Olympics, one of the divers was making a sweater during the Olympics, during the diving competitions. And when he went on talk shows after the Olympics, he had to bring his knitted items as one of the talking points of his segment. And yes, it's great for the publicity, for the visibility that Fiber Arts gets when something like that happens, but at the same time, it's normal. And seeing him in the stands, he was paying more attention to the competition. His eyes were up. He was looking at the competition far more than most of the other people in the audience. And this was the 2020 Olympics. There weren't many people in the audience. Pretty much everyone else had their faces in their phones. And his face wasn't. So that is something I wish we would address, just as a culture of just because someone has something going on with their hands doesn't mean they're not paying attention. And especially when the counterexample to that is almost always you're playing games on your phone or you're scrolling through social media. Now, let's get back to stuff that has happened to me. I go around amusement parks. I have admitted to this multiple times on this channel. I walk around amusement parks with my knitting. And I think it's great. Amusement parks have really long lines, like incredibly long lines, and it gives me something to do. The people I go with, they're playing on their phones. I'm not. So I can work on small squares of a blanket while I'm in parks, and quite often I can get quite far in a 1 hour long line. Now I try really hard not to wait in 1 hour long lines, but sometimes you can't avoid it. Now, being in a longer queue, or being anywhere where you're knitting in public and you're around the same people for more than like 15 minutes, especially when there's kids around, you get a lot of really interesting comments and questions. And again, they go from curiosity to rude. Curiosity ones, what are you doing? What are you making? Who is it for? Normal, curious questions. And normally I will check with the adult, assuming the adult is paying attention, before I talk to the child. But kids also don't cover real well when they're staring. And it's really funny because adults cover really well. Kids don't. So yes, I've caught adults doing the kind of, what are you doing? What's that? Why would you want to do that here? Those kind of faces. And kids, they just stare. It's really fun because quite often they're staring for 2 or 3 minutes before I say a word about it. And then first question for me is do you want to know what I'm doing? And most of the time it's a max 2-minute conversation. Just, this is what I'm doing. This is what it's for. There's a reason I try to take charity projects with me, because then I can use it as a charity conversation rather than I'm being selfish and knitting for me. Now, if we extend that spectrum of questions over, more than once, I have been asked, when are you due? Or some other variation of the are you pregnant? I will say there is a reason I don't take visibly obvious baby blankets out with me as much as I used to. Because I hate that question. I will be honest anytime that I am asked where the blankets are going, and almost 100% of the time the blankets are going to charity. But there are some people who do assume, because I'm knitting, because it's pink or it's blue, that either I'm pregnant or a family member's pregnant, and they can get that not be an assumption. I personally just don't like that assumption. I understand why it's there, but I personally don't like it. And that's okay. Now, we keep going closer and closer to super rude, please don't. The comments of, oh, I tried to learn once. We don't need that. You must have so much patience. Okay. Most of the time, we're literally waiting for a 2-hour long show, or we are in a 30-minute long line for a ride. And I'm sorry, most of us have the patience to slowly work on something. It's just, sometimes it's gaming, sometimes it's cooking, sometimes it's, it doesn't always look the same, and therefore we don't think it takes the same amount of patience. Yes, my blankets take me a while. I also take a month or more to work on them. So I'm not sitting down most of the time and knitting a blanket start to finish, or knitting any project start to finish. So yes, it does take patience. Yes, it does take practice. But I wouldn't say it's an extraordinarily high amount considering everything else that people do. My granny tried to teach me to knit and it didn't quite work. I don't know where anyone expects that comment to go. I hear that comment way more often than I think I should. Cool. Your granny tried to teach you to knit, tried to teach you crochet. That's awesome. If you want to go back to it, that's on you. I will say that YouTube videos and things like knitting or crocheting for dummies are wonderful ways to learn. I will not teach you. Not in a situation like that. I will not teach you. I will show you how my current project is working, but I'm not going to let you touch my project. And again, you need to figure out what your purpose of saying that comment is, because it might not be received the way that you think it's going to be received, or you might be trying to turn the conversation to you when you might have been the one to start the conversation and maybe we weren't interested. So yeah, just think through comments like that. Yeah. I'm going to try really hard not to get into the super duper rude ones, but in general, people who knit and crochet in public, we know we're going to get comments. We know it is unusual. Most people aren't used to seeing it. Please don't make it more uncomfortable than it is. And if you want to learn, that's great. The random people knitting and crocheting in public are not your teachers, and they are not there to go, oh, it's okay, it isn't for everyone. Because most of us don't feel that way. So please, as adults, watch that interaction a little bit and see what's going on. Again, I knit everywhere. I knit in the mall. I knit walking to school. I've knit in class. I have gotten extraordinarily negative reactions to it, being sent to the principals. And I've had extraordinarily positive interactions with it, and everything in between. So, in general, I'm going to continue doing it. But as the person asking those questions and making those comments, figure out why. Some people aren't going to mind it. In general, we're still going to be polite, but see what you're doing and why. And I will see you next time on What's on My Needles.